Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Helms of Brewing, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest today is James Priest of the Referend, and he is here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers alike. First, I'll ask everyone to please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. And furthermore, to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first, this message from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Osmanthus Flowers. Osmanthus radiates fresh floral spring like no other flower. Add Osmanthus to lambics, lagers, pilsners, wit beers, or other Belgian styles. First Tea is your source for Osmanthus and teas that fit the unique flavor profiles you're looking for. Email info@firsttea.com, that's FIRSDTEA, to discover the perfect teas and botanicals for your next project.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Ironheart Canning is the quality leader in mobile canning and much more. With a decade of packaging experience, Ironheart is your turnkey solution for all your canning needs. Ironheart has no minimums on their mobile service, great supply chain quality control like no other, as well as technical support programs. Need canning materials? Ironheart has you covered with cans by the pallet or the trailer load, Pactex case trays, and can ends as well. Ironheart Canning. You have the capability because Ironheart can do it for you. Visit them at ironheartcanning.com or email info@ironheartcanning.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropmaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customersuccess@malteurope.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malt Europe, premium grains from field to flavor.
Let's get into it. So, a little bit about my guest today, James Priest. In 2015, after working in the cellars of breweries and wineries and in the front of house at beer bars and wine bars, James Priest conceived of an all-spontaneous blendery utilizing a mobile coolship and fixed barrel cellar in rural New Jersey. The project, called Referend Beer Blendery, opened in 2016 and has specialized in exclusively spontaneously fermented beers since then. James has since transitioned the blendery to its new permanent home, a Pennsylvania farm brewery with its coolship nestled into an organic vineyard and its barrel cellar built into the earth. James, pleasure to have you here tonight.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
How do I find you this evening?
Pretty good. Pretty well snowed in. And just opened a beer because we were doing this.
Excellent.
But having a good time.
Well, so just to expand on the backstory a little bit, you
Yes.
opened the Referend in 2016, a month apart from when we opened Troon in New Jersey.
Was it even a month? I thought it was like,
It might not, or maybe a week.
I think it was like 2 weeks. I think it was like 2 weeks off or something. But yeah,
I mean,
very close.
so in the beginning, when we met, we had so much alike. We had so many of the same difficulties, trials, tribulations, getting licensing, working with the befuddling, to say the least, New Jersey state legislature, the
Yes.
ABC enforcement arm. So we go way back. And so that's why I was so happy to have you on tonight, because obviously we had very different visions for our breweries, despite being 15 minutes apart. And so proud of what you've built, and I think it's one of the most unique and
Likewise.
singular breweries in the entire country, if not the world. And I think uh, my intention tonight was to give you the pedestal and hopefully expose the people who might not have heard of the referend, if there are such people. I doubt it.
Oh, they exist. They
Are
they
there? Some
oh,
people have
yeah,
not
they
had your
come
beer.
by. They come by every week, and they're as bewildered as they've ever been, and it's kind of delightful still. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, so I thought just to get us started, since we go way back, I thought maybe we could get into the mind of a young James, maybe the
Oh God.
James who was working in the cellars of the breweries and wineries and in the front of house of those beer bars and wine bars.
Mhm.
How about we talk a little bit about what made you think of the referend? Why spontaneous beers? Why New Jersey? We can start at any point you want, but maybe as a point of clarification,
Yeah.
what is the appropriate nomenclature? Is it wild beer? Is it spontaneous beer? Is it lambic? Because I know this used to be
Yeah, they're
contentious.
all right there. They're all either very long-winded or otherwise politically
We've got a
fraught.
full hour, so let's
Yeah,
expand on
yeah.
it.
So I like for now, and since we started spontaneously fermented beer, I understand all the abbreviations to just spontaneous beer or spawn or whatever you like. It's just a nice shorthand.
Hmm.
Technically, since the term applies to the fermentation and not really the beer. I think there's been some confusion by some uh, brewers and otherwise of just that it means the other thing of that you kind of wing it. Somebody had brought that up at like a wild beer a panel
Just wing it.
at a CBC, just like read the wrong dictionary definition of spontaneous. And it was like, so these aren't even spontaneous. It's like, okay, well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about
They're
the
called
kind of,
improvisational beers, right?
yeah, exactly, the kind of automatic, natural, uh, the letting happen of fermentation. Wild beer certainly still applies. It's probably just the rectangle to the square of spontaneously fermented beer in my mind. Yeah, we don't, for ourselves, we try to be specific, but also try to, talk about it however anybody will potentially understand it is at some point the goal, without dumbing it down too much, of course.
Well, it's
Um,
funny. It's funny because if there's conflict and understanding within the brewing industry where ostensibly people know the most, I can't
yeah,
imagine
no, no,
getting
exactly.
that across to consumers.
Yeah, yeah. I was at a family reunion in Iowa this past summer, and uh, a kindly old man apparently follows us on Instagram, and he's like, looks great. I don't know what you're talking about ever, but it all looks great." It's like, well, thank you all the same. That's fine too. Ask me any question you want, but also if you're somehow enjoying it, just as like washing over you, it's delightful.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lick of sense, but man,
No,
does it look, it looks
I
pretty
mean,
though.
probably he said exactly that. Realistically, I probably took the folksiness straight out of it. Unfortunately, was unable to convey it, trying to not, caricature him too much.
That's true. We should
Um,
respect the middle of the
yeah.
country.
Anyway, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
At times, yeah, yeah.
I think that's okay. So I think that's a fair representation. So it's when would you say the first beer that really made an impression on you? Going back, let's start at the beginning, like we said.
Oh God. Like first beer, like at all,
I would say
like
let's narrow it down to a spontaneous or even a wild beer if that was too
so.
far off the
Yeah,
map.
yeah, yeah. In college, when like moving out of the apartment I had been in for the latter 3 years, got like a celebratory, it's probably like an $18 750 or something, which is not college people money.
No.
So we were pretty, this was like a, and thanks for ourselves patting ourselves on the back for putting paint in all the nail holes. If you put it in thick enough, then they don't know and they won't charge you. Anyway, Odell Deconstruction was that beer, which was, I think, the first sort of wild beer that I had. Um, I don't even recall what all it was, other than there were like multiple kind of wild yeast strains to it, and that it was more kind of cidery than anything that I was used to. Was not like an overtly sour one. I think it was probably close to kind of like Russian River Temptation-ish type of beer, if my memory serves. But
Okay.
that was one of those nice, yeah, early, bewildering but enjoyable beer experiences for sure. And just one of those ones where you're like, I didn't know beer could be like this. Um, and we were already getting pretty deep into, the various styles more commonly made by American breweries in the mid aughts. But yeah, those were starting to definitely gain a little bit of, still very niche popularity. And yeah, that one. And then maybe a year or two later, I guess, yeah, no, the next year, time was compressed when
Sure.
you're young, I suppose. But yeah, Cantillon Goose kind of shortly thereafter,
Okay, so getting really
which
into
is
the deep end.
even more. That one was like presented as an actual challenge, I think. That that is some serious acidity, and it's um even more complex and just yeah. I feel like I talk about that one a lot as just being this kind of experience where you just kind of puzzle over, especially the aroma of those beers. And you can just sit with your nose in a glass for like 45 minutes, just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And
Absolutely.
that's just a totally different experience than um, a more thoughtless beer. Not that it was thoughtless in its conception, but that you can be mindless about when you drink it, which is not at all a condemnation on those beers. God knows they have far more of their place in the world. But there was something, yeah, just a little more revelatory about some of the wild beer that I found myself marveling over.
Well, that specific one, it's foreign in every capacity, right? It's imported, it's
Mhm.
sort of mysterious. There's not a whole lot of information on it. Even goose would be
Right, what
pretty
does it mean?
mysterious, right? What is
Yeah,
that?
right.
Especially when American wild ales at the time were, I mean, like you said, it's probably a couple lab strains of Brett and some barrel aging, but
Yep, yep,
fairly straightforward compared to spontaneous beer, true spontaneous beer.
right.
So, as a young man trying this beer, where does your mind go to with your nose in the glass for 45 minutes? Are you puzzling out how they could have made this beer? Are you wondering, or are you more wondering what you're
Um,
identifying in the smell, the aroma?
I think both. I think I had done like it was on draft at Novari Res in Portland, where
Fantastic
we've hung
bar.
out. Great place, yeah, wonderful place. Um, and I think I had done like a little bit of research. I was not like I didn't I don't know that I knew about the hype surrounding Cantillon, but I knew that this was an opportunity to try some of these beers that I had kind of heard murmurings of, that like you know these production methods where you just kind of let it go, you just open it up to everything and kind of see what happens. Is probably my initial naive conception of it, that is honestly not too far from the truth. It just has just a little less risky than that makes it sound. Also much more risky when you build a business around it. But
Certainly.
yeah, but yeah, I was production methods a little. I was working in a brewery at the time, but like just on the canning line, the old, just kind of foot in the door thing.
Absolutely.
It was not Allagash, so I was not, um, a part of their early cool ship days, which were probably going on at that exact time. Um, and yeah, part of that, part of just kind of trying to find a vocabulary if one exists, and this is an ongoing struggle that I like pick up and leave off at times, of just, are these aromatic notes and flavors even worth comparing to other things, or are they kind of fundamentally singular? Does language do these things justice? Are tasting notes worthwhile at all? Like for things that have so many kind of, I don't know, so that have that much nuance that, yeah, you can say apricot, but you don't really mean that. Things that are that kind of fermentation driven, and get all these crazy kind of tertiary aspects. Um, I don't know. I think they defy easy grammar and vocabulary, which
Well, for
kind of
anyone
makes them
knows
all the more
you,
compelling.
I think anyone knows you or is familiar with your brewery knows that you are erudite to say the least. So I don't think you've ever had trouble putting anything into words. But I get your point. I think there's a fine line, right, between identifying on a molecular level what is being expressed by the yeast, right? And
Right.
then something, the actual tasting notes that you smell, which can be subjective, right?
Yeah, and feels like could be kind of inherently reductive, not in the like winemaking, occasional beer making thing of, the opposite of oxidative, but like it's not, you couldn't possibly capture all of the, yeah, all the nuance that your senses are delivering to your brain. You just know there's not like the appropriate words, or that it doesn't fit the neatest or completest categorization. And so I don't know, it feels like sullying it a little bit to try to just kind of compartmentalize everything into like, it's like these three fruit flavors and oak. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. Well, you could see that in wine, and we'll get to wine because I would love to talk
Yeah.
about therein, and um, we will get to that. But I guess from what you're talking about in the early days of Referen, when you started it, were there any breweries that were already doing all spontaneous?
Um, when when I thought of the idea, I think probably DeGard was in process, but had not yet opened.
So a single brewery potentially, and probably along the same timeline.
Yeah, they opened. I think they opened like a couple years prior. So I assume. I mean, and I took probably 2 years, like writing a business plan, getting money, looking all over, central New Jersey for a nice place to land.
Hmm.
But yeah, at some point in that time, DeGard out in Oregon opened up. Yeah, I had thought, yeah, definitely first in America. Instead, we were second, and we're still now two of three. Um, Primitive in Colorado's the third,
So it's safe to
and
say
nobody
you
after.
were you were treading new ground, and you're still leading that charge.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. The wild beer world, I don't know, yeah, maybe it's too early to get into this, but it's changed so drastically in the past, like basically since we opened and a little bit prior, um, because of the sheer enthusiasm, um, that sheer enthusiasm that on some of our parts, I don't know, took on a kind of more quixotic and obsessive, like we just got to do this and only this. And for other people, maybe more of, oh, I don't, maybe just a little more opportunistic. Not that like we weren't also seeing an opportunity in America of like, well, we love Cantillon Trefontaine and can't get enough of it here. Let's try to do the same thing on our own.
But also
But
upholding their own standards. I think that might be what sets it apart from just a purely opportunistic or, you know, in a more reductive way, money grab type of mentality, where we respect their appellation of lambic. We look to the people who pioneered it, and we'll try to do justice to it, but in our own patently American way.
oh, absolutely, yeah. And I'm like at a certain point, knowing how different it's going to be from their beer, kind of no matter what you do, just by virtue of microbes, process, etc., by virtue of that when two breweries in Belgium, even in like the, strict old timey delineations of the Pajottenland, even when they're like, 5 kilometers apart, they have totally different profiles, even when they try to do things the same way. You just know it's not replication's not the goal. But you also want to look to them because they're the strongest proof of concept, basically, for, especially in my mind, long aging beer. Sure, the complexity up front, but also just the kind of the beautiful things that happen to those beers after 5, 10, 20 years in a bottle.
which
I
is which is a
Yeah,
little probably where you're right now. You're probably starting to see those beers that are what 7+ years old now
yeah, the
of
oldest
your own
ones, yeah,
making,
yep.
which is pretty
Um,
incredible, right?
it is, yeah. I would just we got like a little bit of a late start on this brewing season. I guess we just talked about when we opened, but for whatever reason, like I guess because we've started brewing in the spring of 2016, this is our 9th brewing season, and that just feels insane to me.
Wow.
I just, I don't know. Yeah, just doesn't feel like 9 years for sure. And it has not been 9 full years, but coming up on it. Um,
So
yeah,
actually, I mean, maybe that's where we should redirect it back towards production a little bit, because I know that this is a brewer to brewer podcast. So
mm,
why don't we talk about in the beginning? So you started the referend with a mobile coolship, which is to say you did not brew the wort at the referend in New Jersey, in Pennington,
right.
but instead you had partners who would make the wort for you to your specifications. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so instead of investing in a brew house, and especially it's in that cute little bio at the top of the interview, but I didn't really come into this with a wort production background or even too much of a home brewing background. I was really just doing kind of fermentation cellars and packaging things. So that was my wheelhouse more than anything. And I knew I had to, do my research on turbid mashing and everything for this very specific type of beer. Also knowing that like most of the rules for that are nearly the opposite of what constitutes good technical brewing for most other styles. You just want such very different things out of your wort. But yeah, so it felt additionally beneficial, not just the money saving off the brew house, but that like, hey, it's not it's not my thing yet at all. So maybe best to leave all that to people who are already doing that professionally. Granted, different breweries needed a different degree of um, working with on making sure we were hitting temps and stuff on a these brew days are crazy. I'm actually in retrospect surprised that as many breweries agreed to do this as they did. At first I would get like a little bit offended if people, kind of wanted nothing to do with it. After I was like, well, there's no like risk of contamination the way this is all just like it goes out into the cool ship in the truck and it's just normal and I pay you and it's great, but it's also like it's like a 15-hour day, and like fuel costs are exorbitant because you're boiling for 4 or 5 hours, and
And a lot of
you
these
know,
breweries that you're contracting at, right, they're on 4-turn single infusion mashes,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
real production breweries where I'm sure that it must have been driven by the brewers themselves, right? This must have been such
For
a
the most
novel
part,
thing for them to
absolutely, yeah. It
do.
was, yeah. There was a spectrum for sure, but it had to be at least a little interest on the brewer's part. Very rarely would people just like see dollar signs in their eyes from me showing up, a couple times a brewing season and write them a check for the brew day. I mean, it's not nothing, but like that would not be the primary driver for people. Yeah, and some brewers are just like, this sounds like fun, and I'm not allowed to do it on my own. So,
Exactly.
so yeah, sure, why not?
It sounds like a great
Um,
way to break up the monotony
yeah, for sure. And then, there
and to
were
learn a new skill, maybe.
there were only a couple that wanted to do it, especially there's only, yeah, one brewer that didn't have rakes that wanted to do it regularly. Because turbine mash and a dough hoe are it's a quite an exercise. Um, yeah, it's you gotta want it.
So then you did this for how many years did you use the mobile cool ship?
So that was through, well, what is that? I don't know. Yeah, I guess I was just speaking in terms of nine. This is the ninth, so I think through the sixth. Um, Basically, we at one point before we even closed, not okay, so we moved to Pennsylvania. We'll jump ahead. I guess that was also in the bio.
Around season 6, so I'm imagining your lease was running out and you wanted
Right.
something more permanent. Why the because that's a long way from Pennington, so
Oh yeah, we were looking all over. We were looking at some places very close to Pennington. Uh, some in Jersey. We're looking in Stockton at a place. Looked, place a lot closer over the river, southeastern Pennsylvania. Had an offer in the place in the Hudson Valley. We were just getting out of our 6 year lease there. Like it was our lease was up. We hated our landlord. It
mhm.
had proven to be kind of probably too large a space for what we thought we eventually wanted to be doing, and just the cost of leasing versus owning was just going to make less and less sense. I think it's pretty safe to say we, like many today, we probably wouldn't be in business right now had we stayed. Um, I just don't know. Yeah, don't know that we would
Definitely
have pulled
seems
that off, or
prescient in
would have had to pivot
retrospect.
wildly. Sorry, what was that?
I was saying it definitely does seem prescient now that it's borne out after
For sure.
with
Yeah.
COVID and that was a big space. How many square feet was that warehouse?
It was 13,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And we initially wanted the like 9,500 square foot unit next to it, and the landlord kind of uh, cajoled us into the bigger one with some like not charging us for the extra rent for the first few years, but well, guess what? The time goes by, the beer takes its sweet time as it does, and yeah, all of a sudden you're paying on a very, very large space. And yeah, so we at the in 2015 when we were signing that lease, it seemed important for us, like part of the reason, ironically, for being in so large a space is so that we wouldn't have to move, so that we could grow into this space as we
Yep.
would like to. Um, and yeah, then we probably sagely changed.
And now you're in Kutztown, Pennsylvania.
Yes, yes,
You are on the property of a former vineyard,
yep. Well, former winery, current vineyard.
current
Yeah,
that you purchased. I guess the
yeah.
sale was meant to be sort of a turnkey situation.
It was, yeah. So that was the thing is we had looked at dozens of properties, like even I probably in person, over many years. And then this one was, yeah, just by far the most turnkey, uh, kind of in all respects. Yeah, because there was, because our brewery operates so much as if you treat wort like it's wine. So a winery operation with its floor drains and wastewater tank and three-phase power and you know and yeah, cellar in a bank barn, kind of half basement. It just all was, oh man, I don't know. Our eyes just lit up when we were seeing it for the first time because it was exactly what we've been looking for.
I mean, it sounds ideal. I think that's really the dream for people looking for a more pastoral setting. not having to go through zoning variances, not having to erect a new building, which is so capital intensive, all that equipment that you
Right.
have to get into place, all the infrastructure. Um, I'm sure the second you saw it, you must have felt some stirrings.
Yeah, well, and just deep relief. The last few places that we had had offers in and accepted on, between zoning or just the terms of needing zoning approval before we could finalize, purchase was not always what any seller's looking for. Um, and even just financing some of the scale of some of the places. Um, the properties, much less the renovations and getting it to be an actual workable facility is just enormously costly. And that was before we knew that building costs were going to probably go through the roof in that time frame we would have been looking at. So
And with
it
the
was
looming
another
lease,
we dodged, I think, multiple bullets to end up in this very, very nice situation. Yeah.
well, speaking of dodging bullets, we're going to take a short break for a message, and then we're going to come right back for more of this conversation with James Priest of the Reference Beer Blendery and hear more about his transition to Pennsylvania and becoming a brewer and blender.
Brewers across the globe have leveraged the popularity of osmanthus-scented beers. Now, First Tea is bringing that clean, natural flower to North America. Email info@firsttea.com, that's FIRSDTEA, to find out how to use this delicate flower in lagers, wit beers, and more.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropemaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customer success at malteurope.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malt Europe, premium grains from field to flavor.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the advertisements. James, so where we left off, you were fortunate enough to get out of your lease in Pennington. You were doubly fortunate to find a more or less perfect property in Kutztown, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
What happened next? So I imagine you had to move your existing beer out of Pennington.
Right.
How
So we gave
onerous was that?
ourselves very. I mean, I know some people have moved breweries that we're not the first or last to do it, but it is not a lot of fun. Um, I mean, in like retrospect, I wouldn't call it fun, but there's a kind of I don't know, strategic challenge to it, especially for like this kind of beer where we just had to gradually phase out. We had to slowly keep brewing in to the old space, but just enough of like shorter turnaround beers that we knew we would be blending. We didn't want to move any beer that wasn't packaged. So that meant basically bottling
So
through the
all of your
entire
beer.
bottling through the entire barrel cellar, moving all the empty barrels over, slowly, well, first, installing a brew house, getting that going, and then brewing it into a brand new, to us, barrel cellar, so that we wouldn't have too great a lag time or anything between beers there. Obviously, with like the backstock that we cashed away from prior, for the move, there's nobody nobody knows the difference. And we have such kind of wildly different bottle conditioning times. Some things take 3 years and some things take, 2 months. So there's never
3 years
any.
from packaging.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We've got some that are longer. Then I just hold it until I definitely need space back. And so we have some that are, yeah, well, I'll probably release them in a couple months. That I think we got a 2017. Yeah, what is 7? It'll be like just shy of 7 years old from Harvest Creek that we bottled that we never released. That we bothered to move to
Wow.
Pennsylvania with us. And it like tastes pretty good now. It's obviously a totally different beer than it would have been fresh, but this one just happened to not taste good fresh. Anyway, yeah, unpredictable stuff. We just never entirely know.
So
But we
something
learn.
like something like THP, you
Yeah.
can outlast, right? You can just give it time in the bottle to
Yeah,
metabolize.
in theory, we've had a couple things where I wonder about, especially if you've added anything to them. If it's just like, a simple kind of, lambic style goose base type thing, I think it should definitely clean up. There'd be nothing inhibiting it. I'm running into a cinnamon problem, though we've used that successfully in the past, but I'm tempted to say it might be, and maybe it's a different type of cinnamon, might be lightly fungicidal, and could have killed Brett. There's also cider. Sometimes we have trouble. I don't know if people are sulfiting it and lying to me, but we've
Almost
had,
certainly, by the way. Yes, that's
yeah,
almost certainly.
yeah. So we've had some trouble with that as well. And some grape re-fermentations that have been messier, longer than they ought to be. Which, yeah, some people I think have attributed to like kind of soil, like what it was, yan, the kind of what is it? I forget, free amino content of things. But I think is more likely fan free. Yeah. Anyway, I think it's more likely just like a late sulfur dusting or similar kind of fungicidal application too close to harvest. That like sure, if you're pitching your own yeast at a healthy rate, then it's not an issue for you. But for us, it is, and it'll be kind of inhibitory for a while. It's designed to obliterate Brettanomyces in particular, which is the cause and solution of THP. So there's otherwise in theory, in theory and in practice, it arises and it goes away. It's definitely still, thankfully, the exception that it takes its sweet time, and that's in part why we hold on to those. Is even if they don't turn around, I want to still be able to like check in on them and keep notes so we can kind of learn for the future of even if I can't get a farmer to tell me exactly what they did. We can learn a little bit of who to work with and things to beware.
So have you seen any correlation there then with now that you're brewing your own wort, you have your own brew house now, you have total control over the wort composition, how it's brewed,
Mm-hmm.
any sort of esoteric mash schedule that you have or long boils. Do you have a higher success rate now, do you find? Or is it pretty comparable to when you were getting it contract brewed?
Well, we've definitely changed a lot of things. Like nothing is particularly fixed, and one thing we keep kind of upping our hopping rates a little bit to try to keep acid, you still want low pH, but just kind of get a nice palatable acidity.
Is there
So
a
the
pH that you
profile,
target?
ideally it's tricky because ideally the lower the better, as long as you're, I mean, within reason, maxing out on the low end, probably at around 3, that we've had 2.9 that somehow presented very well.
Wow.
I would say in theory, you target something like a, 3.3 or 3.4. Most of the, great beers of this style I've had have been in that range. But if you have a low pH and you don't have any real volatility to it, and it's passing all of your tests of, do I enjoy this? Is this sensorially delightful instead of like bracingly sour and kind of a struggle? Then having a low pH is just nothing but great preservative. So it's
Sure.
not, yeah, it's a little tricky. So we've had beers at 2.9 that have been great. Probably still blended those in with something to hit a beer at about 3.1, and that's the Berliner Messe. So it's, I don't know,
Your
supposed to be a little
your
more.
flagship sort of
Yeah,
beer.
sort of became that inadvertently, and I'm happy with that. Yeah, it's supposed to just be session champagne, so it's that little session sour wine. Is just kind of the goal there. Um, but it's low is good. I think it's easy to get spooked by. But obviously just it's about how it tastes first.
Do you ever are you measuring titratable acidity, or is that
I'm
something that
not.
is a factor? That's more just up to your
I know I alluded
subjective
to it as if
opinion.
I alluded to it as if I did. It's just kind of like if you can taste in my mind, if you can taste absolutely no acetic acid, um, then you're winning. Um, like if you could do that with a low pH, everybody's having a good time. Well, not everybody, but everybody who's already predisposed to enjoy this type of beer.
Would you
Um,
say that acetic acid is a flaw that is impossible to overcome through blending?
no, certainly not. Um,
Do you think
but
it
it
has a place
depends.
in blending?
It could. It could. I think it's a real risk. It has a real risky place in blending, and so you got to know that risk. And obviously, it depends on the type of beer that you're making. Like for most spontaneous beer, I would even kind of say most pale wild beer. Though is Petrosage Pale Ale still a thing? That was pretty nice. It probably had some notable acetic. Anyway, it's not
Maybe some Flanders reds that are out there still.
right. Like I think I want a tiny bit of that bite in those beers. Um I think it can be probably, especially if you have more residual sugar, kind of a deeper malt aspect to it. I think that'll play better. It can really just, it can just be sharp and abrasive and not particularly nice. I wouldn't like call it a categorical flaw. It's just got to kind of cohere. And it's tough to make it cohere. It can be blended out, but it's always that risk of, I don't mean like blended out of existence. I mean like blended back into a threshold level. If
And you find that it's stable at that level?
if I mean if you're like if it's right before packaging and you're doing some like CO2 purging, if you're working fairly kind of clean and keeping additional oxygenation out of the equation, it shouldn't run rampant, and it should take especially pending a kind of hardy bottle refermentation where you're carving to 3-4 volumes. At that point, you've got this anaerobic environment that it's not going to, the acetobacter, the thing causing all of your stresses and what's keeping you up at night should be kind of laying dormant at that point. Maybe it's a problem for like when the cork fails and 10, 20 years later, instead of having like a nice lowly carb beer, maybe it starts turning uglier more than it would otherwise. But
So
I
essentially,
yeah.
you can there is a tolerance threshold, and with proper packaging, it shouldn't present too much of a problem. However, it's just very specific to the style of beer.
Yeah, and we court it at times. Like I'm also a lover of like a gentle amount of oxidation in these types of beers, but then you're talking about intentionally not topping up and leaving headspace in the barrels, which that's an increased risk you take with that. Um, it's all a little too much swinging for the fences at times. But then you try the examples of that where it really works and you don't want to do anything else.
It's I have such an appreciation for what you're doing because these experiments bear out over so many years. It's not so simple. You're taking a risk and trusting your judgment and then hoping that in 2 years it tastes all right. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
that's a real test of your faith every time, I
it
imagine.
it is, and at times it'll just like make an ass of you for sure. But I don't know, still feels worth it, I would say, most of the time. Um, yeah. Oh, the one thing I was gonna say, differences there versus here that has only occurred to us like later than one would like just this kind of past brewing season is the inadvertent or just inherent agitation that all of our work got sitting in an IBC tote coming back to the blendery, that now that everything's on site, I'm struggling to try to like recreate by like awkwardly just maybe like, I mean, I could just put in an IBC tote and drive it around, but that's dumb. Instead,
And it's
yeah,
because you would park the truck with the lift gate open, you
yeah,
would then pump it when it was sufficiently cooled from the cool ship into an IBC and
right,
then drive it back.
right.
So that agitation, maybe over what, an hour drive on the highway,
Yeah, yeah, up to two, but yeah,
or 2 hours.
usually 45 to yeah, 45 minutes to 2 hours. Um, but I think, yeah, in terms of just like aerating wort and getting kind of a strong fermentation from that, it makes sense. And we would always kind of mess around a little bit with like, do we go into the cool ship, through a port? Do we give it as vigorous? Do we drop in from 4 feet, or like turn the pump way up and really kind of spray it around?
Could you put
We
an
we
O2 stone in line out of the cool ship?
we have never. No.
Okay.
It's just, I mean, it's seeing so much oxygen otherwise from the cool shipping. But yeah, I hadn't the additional beating up of the beer in transit hadn't uh hadn't occurred to me as much as being probably a kind of integral element of our brewing process those first several years. So to try to get continuity, it feels like, even though nothing, it's different. It was always different wherever we were brewing. Um, but trying to get some semblance of continuity in the character, and then how the fermentation will perform.
So, it's such a small process step that you wouldn't think about, right? It's just kind of invisible. It's just a necessity, right? You have to move it, bring it back to
Yeah,
the blender for then it to have maybe a meaningful impact on the final beers. Uh,
yeah.
I guess.
I just think when you're not pitching anything yeast wise, everything kind of matters like a little more. It just inherently like that medium, the media that you're laying out for wild yeast is all you've got, really. Whatever you made on the brew day and whatever the kind of weather and ambient environment and how you treated it, um, whatever whatever all those factors did is the beer that you get, more or less. Not to neglect barrels and all the things they'll do, but those yeah, I think that those early fermentation days are very formative for the lifespan of the beer for sure.
So how much is that different for wine? Because I think it's just accepted that wine has tons of natural yeast present on the skins and that
Mhm.
you would imagine it's simpler to orchestrate a spontaneous fermentation of fruit. Is that a misunderstanding? How similar is it for your wine project? If you'd like to
I
just briefly talk about it.
Sure, it's tiny, in part because we did our little cold turkey conversion to the vineyard right when we got here, to all kind of organic and uh, non Steiner biodynamic. By which I mean we'll like use fun kind of lactobacillus, well, presumed lactobacillus from our Berliner Messe dregs and propagate those and pump those into the vineyard.
Wow.
Ideally, to divest ourselves eventually from the Bayer equivalents that kind of cost a lot of money. So anyway, that's on the vineyard side, which of course is what matters a lot. Like I was talking about with late fungicidal applications, that's kind of a big part of most people's viticulture is killing off. Unfortunately, a lot of the good with the bad. You're killing off, yes, powdery mildew, downy mildew, etc. But you're also killing off all of the yeast, all the wild yeast populations in your vineyard that would be the most kind of good and natural source for those fermentations. So for us, we don't really treat them a whole lot differently. The wine project, their end wine, and the referend. They're technically like distinct licensed and legal entities and everything, but it's the same ethos of just quit messing with it. Just let the yeast do their thing. And in the one case, right, with wine, you say you trust that the yeast is there because it's on the skins of the fruit. And with beer, it's that much more dramatic because you trust that it's present in the air on the night that the wort's in the cool ship, which is, I just think that's a lot more fun. Like I like spontaneous fermentation of wine and cider. I think it's also very delightful and yields similar degrees of just wonderful complexity you can't get. But philosophically, I think beer spontaneous fermentation is just like it's a little like nearly theological of just this whole kind of like unseen life in the air, in the wind that comes and uh, fulfills that apocryphal Ben Franklin quote of God, whatever the hell,
Which one? There's
make us happy.
dozens.
Yeah, no.
I
Beer
know
is proof
the one on
that
dish towels.
God, beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Is that the one?
That's right.
That
And I
thing.
think that should resonate with all brewers because if you look at the history of this trade, I mean, it really started as a mystery. There was no understanding of the microbiology or fermentation. It's just, a series of rituals
Right?
and happen to be performed by the men of scripture. So, I think you mentioned theology. I think there's an inextricable link there. Um,
Yeah, more than
and
I'd like to belabor, but it's there. Yeah,
Sure, sure. And it may be for the best that we distance ourselves. But
true.
I think, I think it's interesting that with all those projects going on, it's still beer that captivates you. And I think probably most of us can relate to that as someone who loves natural wine as well and minimal intervention ciders. I- There is something special, and I think there is a really cherished place for spontaneous beer. Just the longevity, the complexity, the real distinct differences between producers. Uh, I can see why it's caught the attention and fascination, obsession of so many beer drinkers and enthusiasts.
Absolutely. Yeah, it just somehow stays interesting where I become easily bored or want to move on to the next thing, which admittedly with wine inadvertently and moving here we're kind of doing, but it's part and parcel of the same thing for sure.
Absolutely. And I guess as sort of a final question for you, it does seem to be that a lot of consumers they expect breweries to make everything. I
Mhm.
think that there's a big pushback against breweries who try to specialize in one thing as though they should be providing everything. And I guess I would ask you, what beyond just philosophically
Yeah.
keeps you interested in spontaneous beer, and how do you speak to a consumer who might ask you why you don't have a stout on the menu or why you aren't making hoppy beers?
Well, I like my snarkier response that I've had, but is also one of the real ones. And in part, like, though it's a little backward seeming, but it's kind of why we started doing this, is that there's 10,000 breweries doing the type of beers that they're talking about wanting. And like, it's a, there's a lot of them. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you can go find those beers that you seek. And we started this to make, even if other people are doing something similar, it's not the same, and it won't be and can't be. And so I just didn't have a whole lot of interest in that. I love drinking everybody else's style beers that they do well. And thankfully in Pennsylvania, we can at least serve some of those alongside our own beer, so that we don't have to like turn away everyone who doesn't want to, get their shit rocked by fun complexity for the first time in their life. But
Do you have many people? I mean, with where you are as a destination brewery, do you have many people who are just clueless who happen in and?
Yes, yeah. Well, in part because it was a somewhat popular winery for so long, there were a lot of people in the area. They're on like wine tours. They'll just like be driving by
Oh
and see
no.
that it's a vineyard. They'll stop in, and like we have some of our wine, you buy the glass here, and so they don't have to, be wildly disappointed that way. Except that everybody wants just like free wine tastings where they just get to, just get to drink an ounce of everything for free. But yeah, obviously we're not doing that.
Yeah, you have
But
you have a few 15 bricks Final Gravity wines for them, right?
yeah, of course.
Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. None to date.
I could just
Yeah,
imagine a hapless wine tourist, a little buzzed already, and they're like, "Man, I used to love this place. You really fucked this wine up."
right, right. We did. There was a guy kind of like that, who, yeah, basically stole from us, but it's fine. It
Oh,
just like ordered. Well, I guess he just thought he was just ordering like a taste or something, and I poured him a glass, and he was like, "Nah, thanks though," and just left. And I was like,
hmm.
I'm not gonna chase you
Yeah,
down."
not gonna
But
explain how this business works, but
yeah, exactly. Thankfully, that was a one-off.
okay.
But also, I mean, it's not necessarily for people that are loving every aspect of being on just like a bachelorette wine tour or what have you. Um, but wine drinkers often like it since our early Jersey days. If you had like a mixed group of people, and you had some people who were like, I drink beer, I like porters and stouts and sometimes IPAs or whatever. And you had someone who's like, I don't like beer, I like wine. Like a strong majority of the time, that avowed wine drinker prefers our beer to the avowed beer drinker who is certain they know all about beer but have never about beer. I did it. I named it in situ. Um yeah, for the beer drinker that thinks they know all about beer, they're furious that that they didn't that they maybe they didn't know all about beer, and it would be far easier to just write off this new bewildering glass than to learn how to enjoy it. There's certainly, yeah, certainly still those people, and there always will be, and there's, nothing at all wrong with that. But to specialize, I don't know. It's, yeah, whether it's some of these low ABV breweries who Josh Bernstein just wrote this article, maybe, or like, yeah, Sacred Profane, yeah, all lager breweries, what have you, all wild breweries. It's
And the shrinking of choice, is that the article you're talking about?
I think so. That sound right? Yeah,
Yeah, just,
yeah, yeah.
shifting
We
away
have
from the
meeting
100
houses and
tap craft breweries
yeah,
and going to, maybe 8 selections,
right,
or in the case of Meeting House 3, or
right.
Sacred Profane, I think only does 2.
Yeah, they do too, but then they do like, you can get a shot of Allen's coffee brandy in. You do the different amounts of foam, black and tan. There's still like somehow 12 beers on their menu from only having 2 beers.
I love that.
Yeah, it's not yeah, certainly not a bad way to do it.
And
Um,
according to Untapped, you've made 200 beers, actually in excess of 200 beers,
yeah, well, we've
but
only made
presumably
like,
not on tap at one time,
right, there's that. Yeah, I think never more than like, I guess on our anniversary party, we sometimes have like 20 on tap.
which I would encourage everyone listening if you can, unfortunately once a year, but an amazing party.
It is. It's always the best. The people are the best, and it's just, yeah, just always great. That farewell party we had in Pennington was, yeah, a
Wow,
delight.
that was a real
Um,
delight.
yeah. Um, oh, I've forgotten what we were talking about, but you also said that was the last question. So
Well, I think you said it best. It's just quit messing with it.
we're
I
messing with
think,
it.
I think, I
I think it's
mean,
something that can resonate with everyone.
I really do think so. I think a lot of brewers could learn to a certain extent to accept the things that are out of their hands and embrace
Mhm.
them. And also, I think there's so much virtue in creating a beer that you can look forward to in the future and that has that longevity on the shelf and that will continue to mature and that shares in so many ways in the unique aspects of wine.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any reason we shouldn't appreciate it in the same way that wine people appreciate their vintages.
Hmm. Amen. That's what we're lazily trying to preach to the world.
I think you're doing a fantastic job, James.
Thank you, Alex.
It was so great to have you on tonight. Thanks for
Thanks so much for
indulging me
having
in all
me.
my questions about your brewery and your blendery.
Of course. I hope that, I haven't heard yours yet, but I hope that
Oh,
because I
you can
didn't
make
ask
sure to
you
skip
very
it.
many it was not as conversational as it ought to have been. But I guess that's the nature of this podcast. It's just I'll do that to the next person.
Yes, make sure to be as selfish as possible. That is the key, I think.
I'll just dominate both. I'll just not
Set your zoom up so you can look at yourself in the reflection and it will echo a little bit just to keep you on your toes.
perfect.
All right. Well, thank you, James, from the Referent Brewery in Kutztown, Pennsylvania. Please, everybody, if you're in the area, it's so worth a trip out there to their vineyard, tap room, and blendery. James will be back on the next episode as the host, having a conversation with a brewer of his choosing. That'll air in about 2 weeks, so make sure to tune in for that. And again, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow them on social media. And additionally, to support journalism in the beer space, please check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. And again, I am Alex Helms of Troon Brewing. You've been listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic week. I will see you at the next one.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. First Tea invites you to explore the rich and versatile world of teas and botanicals, including osmanthus flowers. Email info@firsttea.com, that's FIRSDTEA, for support in choosing the right botanicals and the optimal ways to use them.
Ironheart Canning is the quality leader in mobile canning and much more. With a decade of packaging experience, Ironheart is your turnkey solution for all your canning needs. Are you looking for a unique can size or nitro dosing? Ironheart offers filling sizes from 6 ounce up to 19.2, dedicated equipment for mixed culture products, and nitro dosing capabilities for still beverages and beer. Looking to break into other beverage segments? Look no further. Ironheart also provides a robust network of co-packing solution to get a variety of beverages in cans, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic alike. Ironheart Canning. You have the capability because Ironheart can do it for you. Visit them at ironheartcanning.com or email info@ironheartcanning.com.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit maltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customer success at malteurope.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malt Europe, premium grains from field to flavor.